All right, so yeah, my name is JC Hall. I'm an LMSW. I'm a hip hop artist and a hip hop therapist. So I work as a social worker at a transfer high school in the South Bronx for youth who are overage and undercredited. And I put together a studio program there. We're wrapping up our 8th year. So yeah, we put together a recording studio in the school back in 2013, and utilizing that to engage youth in a studio approach to hip-hop therapy, particularly getting them involved with the expressive techniques of, writing, recording, performing, all of that. Well, for me personally, hip-hop has always been therapeutic. As an artist, right, it's always served as a way for me to get things off my chest and really make sense of a lot of what was going on around me and also inside my head. So hip hop was tremendously healing for me growing up, as far back as I can remember. And then I stumbled across my late mentor, Dr. Tyson's work randomly. Randomly entered hip hop therapy into the search bar, and all these articles popped up, these evidence-based articles, and I was like, what is this? Because I was always passionate about mental health, primarily through my own struggles with it. So, having overcome certain things, wanting to be of service in some sort of way. And hip-hop just seemed like a very natural medium, but I didn't know anything like hip-hop therapy existed. So I was looking into music therapy programs, but I wasn't able to get in, because I don't know how to play any instruments or sing. So I was kind of frustrated because it felt like I was being told that my music wasn't real music. So that's how I randomly was like, let me try hip hop therapy. Nothing's going to pop up, but let me just try it. It was back in 2010. And, boom, Dr. Tyson's work popped up. Happened to be teaching at the one school in the whole world that I applied to get my master's in social work, and we just hit it off from there. I reached out to him and asking if I could shadow him, pick his brain, and we just clicked. Had our common love for and identification with hip hop, and so yeah, it all started back then, about a decade ago. Yeah, so Dr. Tyson passed back in 2018. It was sudden, and we were working together on a textbook about hip-hop therapy, and we're getting ready to publish and kind of compile it all. And after he passed, a lot of his work was lost, and it was just tremendously unfortunate. I mean, on a personal tip, he was a close friend, not to mention my professor and then mentor and collaborator, but also to the field as a whole. I mean, it was a huge loss. Like, this dude paved the way for any of us out here doing this. And, he had a lot more. He had a lot more to offer. So, yeah, I created the website hiphoptherapy.com just to try to honor his legacy and really, I wasn't seeing his name come up in conversations around the phrase hip-hop therapy, and I thought it was really important that people pay homage to where it came from, and at the very least acknowledge that, or for people unaware, to be aware. So hiphoptherapy.com is a resource for people who want to learn more about Tyson's work. What is hip-hop therapy? What does it look like? So yeah, that's kind of been the primary way that I've been focused on promoting his legacy, and furthering the cause as best as I possibly can. I mean, it's never going to be the same, but just trying to do what's in my power, whether that's always speaking, whenever I present, speaking about him, because he laid the foundation for everything I'm doing and was instrumental in helping me conceptualize my own approach. So yeah, I'm forever indebted to him, and that's definitely very important to me. I don't know if I would say I see myself as a caretaker so much as just a promoter, right? Like, I think he laid the foundation. It's all there for anyone willing to look into it and do a deep dive into the research and into the literature. So he's well established in his own right. You know what I mean? So at the very least, I'm just trying to help bring that to the forefront and make sure people don't forget. And for those who don't know, to at the very least introduce them to where this all came from. For one, you know, being able to do this course with Kathy Malkioti, I mean, that's huge. She's an OG in this field. Expressive arts therapy, trauma, a woman of many hats, many skill sets, many books. I mean, it goes on. And I think being able to provide a workshop with her and collaborate with her has been tremendous for me and for just the conceptualization of hip-hop therapy and drawing parallels, especially between hip-hop therapy and expressive arts therapy. I mean, who better to do that with than someone who is a boss in that field? You know, so that's an absolute honor. And I think that will help introduce hip-hop to expressive arts practitioners, and then also introduce the various ways in which we can engage individuals through different sensory modalities to the hip-hop community and individuals using hip-hop in their clinical practice. So I think it's a beautiful mesh and mix and a very nice way to further and bolster the evidence base and the theory behind hip-hop therapy, because it's a lot of parallels have been drawn, you know, between, particularly through Tyson's work, you know, drawing parallels between hip-hop therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused therapies, psychodynamic, music therapy, poetry therapy. You know, in the literature, a lot of these parallels have been drawn, and a lot of what I've been trying to push over the past several years and the way I conceptualize it in my, you know, through my work with Tyson, was introducing the overlap with expressive arts therapy and the idea of this intermodal nature. And since, you know, hip hop is a culture, it represents more than just the music, what people might kind of traditionally think. There's movement involved, there's visual art with graffiti, there's various elements. And so to try to work through an intermodal approach where you're incorporating all of the senses, especially when it comes to trauma work, you know, in terms of regulation and co-regulation, synchrony and entrainment. You know, there's a lot of things that utilizing hip hop, the various artistic mediums within the culture, that can really assist in regulation and traumatic processing. And this course will really introduce that through a trauma-informed lens, and alongside, like I said, you know, someone as a pioneer like Kathy. Yeah, so Haven in the Booth, we started shooting in January of 2020, so it was right before the pandemic hit, and we had like a good solid week. This incredible crew from out in Cali, you know, for a student project, flew out and just came and were flies on the wall for a week and caught, you know, the interactions with several incredible students, Mark, like you said, being one of them. And yeah, it's a real beautiful thing, I think, when the nice thing is that the youth like them, you know, so that's the most important thing. They kind of have to come out first. And if the youth like them and this is something that they're interested in doing and want to actually do, cool. If the youth don't like vibe with them, then it's, you know, not happening. It was a similar process with the previous documentary, Mott Haven. And yeah, you know, the youth, and they clicked, you know, and then it's beautiful because you kind of forget they're there, you know, and it because they're just there 24, you know, they're there the whole time, and they just kind of become flies on the wall. And, you know, being able to watch the documentary back is really nice because it gets to really show. It's nice for me to be a witness of the work occurring, you know, as opposed to like being in it. I'm witnessing it, but I'm also really involved in trying to facilitate. And so to kind of watch back, I think it's beautiful because it elucidates certain processes that I might not even be fully aware of in the moment. certain techniques or things I might be doing that are more implicit, and then being like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to do more of that, So it's really cool, and the kids love it too, because it's kind of like, man, here are these students flying out from Cali to come meet us. You know what I mean? Like, they actually care what we have to say, what we think. There's an audience out there for this. And there's interest. I think that's tremendously validating in and of itself. Especially for youth, from marginalized populations who, traditionally systems and just generally the general public, right, hasn't really cared much for. So to kind of provide a platform to have a voice, I think can be a really empowering experience. And it was beautiful to watch that unfold in the filming of Haven in the Booth. And I'm super excited for it to come out when it finishes on the film festival circuit. It's interesting. I get asked this a lot, and I think maybe despite popular belief, for me, maybe aside from the implicit biases we all ascribe to each other, my being white has never been an issue. I've never had a student, not want to engage with me or judge me because of that, or and I think that really speaks to the cross-cultural power of hip-hop. Hip-hop is like, granted it has, primarily black and brown roots, right? It's very important, first and foremost, to know where it came from, but what it's evolved into as a global entity, a global culture. It's cross-racial, cross-ethnic, it's cross-geographical boundaries, socioeconomic boundaries, things that typically kind of that society defines us by, or that we identify by. It's it's a beautiful thing, and it's been able to cross those barriers. And hip hop, I feel like, is something you kind of embody. If you identify with hip hop, hip hop heads, you'll hear them say, "I am hip hop," as opposed to "I do hip hop." So it's something you kind of see and smell on each other. And I think, despite being white, the youth that I work with, I think we meet on that cultural turf, under that same flag, to the point where it's just not really relevant. I mean, race is always relevant and always needs to be a part of the conversation, especially when you're talking about, as a social worker, right, discussing systems and individual work. So conversations around race, class, all of that, are constantly occurring. But they're done through hip hop, and I think it's because it is through that vehicle, these conversations can go much further, because it feels like, even though we might look different or be different, we both have our feet at least in one set thing, a shared space. So yeah, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about hip hop, the way it kind of has transcended and transcends typical racial barriers and dividers. The way it encourages important conversations about that when it does come up. But yeah, it's primarily, the youth of color that I work with, my being white it's just never been an issue. And that to me isn't a surprise, because that's kind of how it is in hip hop. You know what I mean? Hip hop is, in my experience, is generally a very accepting community. Like, if you respect the art, the traditions, the culture, it doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from. And yeah, I think that's something that also comes a benefit of bringing this into therapeutic spaces, is that kind of comes along. It's showing a respect for that culture. Yet, like, even if you don't have the identification with the culture, right, you're not an artist or a practitioner of hip hop, at the very least, a respect for it and a willingness to learn, and just asking, like, put me on to artists that you like, put me onto stuff that, teach me. A lot of it's about authenticity, and as long as you're just real with the kids and or anyone you're working with, I think it's in hip hop therapy, but in any therapeutic approach, I think authenticity is key. I think if you're trying to present as something you're not, kids are gonna, people are gonna smell that on you and just see right through it. The hope is to get it, as established as an evidence-based practice as possible, right? I think to get it to a point where it's receiving, national grants and can be, get a couple RCTs under its belt, randomized controlled trials. And yeah, that's the hope is to make it global, right? Because hip hop is global, and hip hop has served as a healing force across the world. That's why it's resonated and taking root everywhere. So wherever there is an identification or an interest in hip hop therapy will be tremendously useful, and that's worldwide. That's El Salvador, Japan, Seoul, South Korea, like that is everywhere. And so the goal is to have this available, to have practitioners all over the world able to engage individuals through this approach, to just promote healing on a global scale.